Hi, my name is Isabel Jones, and this is my Module 2 assignment covering the Mediterranean creation myths. Um, by using the comparative and cultural approach on the three creation stories in the Mesopotamian region, it is clear that the newer narratives were influenced by Enuma Elish. And beginning with the comparative approach, looking at the three prime creation stories within this region, the only similarities are that women are the sources of evil to man, that humanity was created for worship, and they were made in the image of their creator. Breaking it down further, Genesis and Enuma Elish were both temple tales, meaning that it was the inevitable story of, or the inevitable creation of a temple. And in Genesis' case, it is the Garden of Eden, and in Enuma Elish, it is the Temple of Marduk. They're both functionalist stories, meaning that they both, each event happens on a different day, and that the purpose of humanity was given by gods, for the gods, or God. And Mumu and the serpent, which is kind of a leading humanity towards evil, is the best way I can explain it. And the differences between these is that Genesis is a monotheist, meaning one God. It's very anthropocentric, meaning that it is heavily revolved around humans. Evil was chosen by humanity, and Eve was created as a helper. Enuma Elish, they were polytheists, many gods, and they had a hierarchy of gods, and humanity was created with Kingu's blood. Enuma Elish and Theogony have the most similarities, in my opinion. They're both polytheists. They have a hierarchy. There's a theme revolved around chaos. For Enuma Elish, it is the loudness of the gods, and for Theogony, it is the nothingness before the creation. It was chaos. And the last two, Earth was initially created for the gods and inevitably worked humanity into it to take care of Earth, and a constant power struggle between the higher ups. In Enuma Elish, man was made from evil, and it began with water. In Theogony, man was made by Athena and Prometheus. It's a little gray, but it works. And they began from nothing. In Genesis and Theogony, there's the least amount of comparison and really differences altogether. The creations began with nothing, and evil is the result of disobedience. Genesis, God began with heaven and earth, and their one God is eternal. In Theogony, gods are created, or gods are the source of evil, and pretty much every other detail is different. Now, looking at the cultural approach, Hesiod's Works and Days does not have much to offer in terms of the comparative method applied to the creation stories. However, it is worth noting that the Works and Days has the myth of Pandora and the jar, which really just irons out the belief that women are the source of evil on man. That being said, Hesiod pretty much serves the ancient Greeks' beliefs and cultural values on a several platter. The 5 stories told by Hesiod highlight that the most important value man should have is the understanding that gods were in control. He promotes this idea repeatedly, but the most obvious sign was the fable of the hawk and nightingale. This symbolic story demonstrates this belief by illustrating that the hawk, or gods, will forever have power over the nightingale, or humanity. The writing of Justice and Good Conduct says that gods are in control of a man's fate, behave and obey, or the gods will make fools of us all. These books were written during the Iron Age of Greek history. Hesiod recounts the Greek timeline in his story, The Ages of Man. He inevitably comes to his age, or the 5th generation of man, and paints a dreary picture of life during the Iron Age. He says, "Men never rest from labor and sorrow by day, and perishing by night, and the gods shall lay poor trouble on them." Now, The ancient Greek stories, Hesiod stories, are more recently written than the other two from ancient Near East. Genesis was written before Hesiod's books, but after Enuma Elish. The Israelites came from Canaan, a subset of Mesopotamia. Genesis is the oldest book in the Bible, and yet the narrative still illustrates cultural values for this group of people. The Israelites must have had a high regard for humanity. Throughout Genesis 1 through 3, it is clear that God created man to rule his creation. God took immense value in everything that he had created, but especially in mankind. And with that being said, Eve had been created from Adam as a helper, but at least in this version, they were not equals. She was also the first to disobey God and to be tempted by evil. This shows that the Israelites may not view women as anything more than a servant to man. However, more than anything, the people of Canaan believe in one omnipotent God who they were made to serve and worship. Now, in Enuma Elish, it was written by the Babylonians. This text is a little bit more difficult to navigate in regards of cultural values and beliefs, but it is clear that they too, like the Greeks, believed in multiple gods and were in control, or in that those gods were in control of humanity's fate. They were also under the belief that humanity was created imperfect and all of them had one purpose, and it was to please the gods. This most likely meant that they would present offerings to various gods to ensure good fortune. Along with this, they may have had a hierarchical system where the kings or leaders were thought to be the closest to God. Another thing worth noting is that the Babylonians either had a lot of experience with violence or was currently experiencing violence during this time, as Enuma Elish is essentially a war story that resulted in the creation of man. And by using the comparative approach, it is easy to see how these cultures may have influenced one another and make assumptions about the people in each culture. The cultural approach furthered these ideas and allowed me to draw conclusions about the varying Mediterranean cultures. When applying this to modern narratives, I chose The Blind Side and McFarland, USA. It is essentially the same, but the cultural approach is nearly redundant as, for the most part, the narratives will outright tell you the values of the characters. And when applying the approaches to modern narratives, it creates more depth within the source, and it forces you to take notice in details that otherwise, or that would have been overlooked otherwise. This is just reiterating that, and other examples of this would be like the Civil War, hip hop music, banned books, and so on and so forth.